So that was a lot of stuff, and I get it. So I'm going to try to now focus on what I'm going to call the bread and butter of the class, like how we transforming it a little bit. And so if you've got the data set, if you have SPSS, if you got all of that, then you would just follow me. Just follow what I'm doing, and you will be doing the exact same thing, and you'll be practicing on SPSS. And let me tell you, these are important skills to have. To be able to say that you have familiarity with SPSS is going to be one of these little things that are going to give you an advantage when you go into the labor market. Believe me, this is a tool. Understanding this type of software is a tool that you just are going to need to know. There are other softwares out there that do the same thing, so just getting an understanding of maneuvering around this, it's going to be important because it just makes your life just that much easier. So, but for the rest of us, this is what I'm going to focus on. So I'm going to show you an example here, and I'm going to put this example out for you guys to do. We're going to practice on frequencies. So what variables can you do frequencies on? Well, remember, the only variables that you can do frequencies on are going to be nominal level variables. Why nominal level variables? Well, because it just gives you the percentage of each one. So I'm going to show you some frequencies. And so here's the data set, right? Not that difference. So I'm going to look at frequency. And age, I do not want the frequency for age because the frequency for age would be what you saw before, just a whole lot of numbers laid out. So, and let me just show you this as an example. Let's take age just as an example. Display frequency tables, and here is my frequency distribution for age, right? I just got it. I'm closing off all the other things so that you don't have to pay attention to any of the other things. Here's my frequency distribution for age. Now, try to make sense of this, right? It's impossible to make sense of it. 3.2% or 50, 51, it's 3.2%, 52, 3.4%, 53, 3.5%, 54, 3.5%, right? And as it gets older, you see that the numbers decline. Well, okay, the one thing you could tell from this is that as the people get older, there are few of them. That's it. That's all you could tell. There's nothing else that you could tell from this data set, and it doesn't make sense to be able to do percentages or anything like that. So that's why interval level data makes no sense. As a matter of fact, when you get to even nominal level data, there's a certain point where things get lost. Again, um, a rule of thumb, and this is important rule of thumb, is to keep it around 7 categories. If it's more than 7 categories, you're probably going to confuse your audience. I'll give you another example of this. So now this is actual nominal level data. So take occupation. Right now you can say, well, wait a minute, occupation, you can tell one is greater than the other. Actually, can you? Can you tell that one is greater than the other? Or is it that you just have a preference? Now, maybe they could make more if you, for example, are a teacher versus, something else. But the reality is that, you really can't tell what one is greater than the other. So I'm going to take occupation uh, 2010 basis because this one actually gives me the actual categories. I'm just going to show you this. All right, chief executive officers, general operating managers, managers of marketing. Now you could say, hey, a chief executive is above a manager in a marketing, but by how much? By their salary. Well, you don't have their salary here. You can't say that, right? And it depends on which company, right? And in some company, a CEO could be making 2, 3, 4, 10 million, 30 million, 50 million, $100 million, while in a small company or a different company, they could be making, or in another country, they could be making, $100,000, $30,000. It just depends, right? You're CEO of your own corporation and your corporation just manufactures t-shirts out of your basement. Maybe you're only making $30,000 a year and you've incorporated for tax purposes, right? This is what you have to pay attention to, right? Now, so now, could you say that this is a higher rank than the other? Yes, but because there's an ordinal aspect to this, but the thing is that it makes it much more nominal like. But try to make sense of all these categories. I mean, there's so many categories here, it's nearly impossible to try to make any sense of this. And so, what we actually do is that we transform this variable of occupation into other categories. We sum them up, we crunch them together, and that is kind of what um, the work that you find here is kind of trying to let you do. So if I go to, right, recoding variables, that's what I'm doing over here with education. I'm basically recoding the variables from all these different numbers so that they make more sense into a much more organized number, right? You click on here just to give you a show, right? Here are all these categories, what I just have there, and basically I take these and I recode them into these new codes, right? And that's how I deal with education. But I would do the same thing with occupation. And as a matter of fact, I do have in the final statistics numbers here where it says to finalize data, right? Click on there. I do have a syntax. If I download the syntax, open it up, it'll give me this. Syntax is so you guys understand that computers work point and click. You point at something, but actually what you're doing is these are, we can call them windows, but these are basically interface that allows you to be able to do coding without actually writing coding, right? So whenever you click on a button, you're actually clicking on a code, and in the background, it's writing the code, right? This is where if you go to Windows and you go to DOS, DOS is the background system, the program that actually runs Windows. Windows is just the interface that allows you to do DOS. That's basically what it's. The internet is the same thing, right? When you do JavaScript, right? If you learn JavaScript, you understand that you're actually writing code, but that when you click on the internet, on anything, you're actually clicking on it to write a particular code script, and then it writes the code script and runs it, and that's why you get around. But that's the interface. So SPSS is no different. SPSS uses the exact same thing. This is just the coding for it. So this is coded as SPS syntax code, and that's what it's called. And down here, if you scroll down, you will see that I have one for occupation. See, here's occupation down here. And the way that I can recode occupation is into these 21 categories. Why 21 categories? Well, because, you know, these are the main categories that are there. Now, I can actually get more specific and recode those into much more detailed categories. Do that. No, I didn't do that. Oh, no, I did. Where I describe them as, um, here it is. So I take those variables, upper service jobs, middle service jobs, lower service jobs, and blue collar jobs. Why I identified those? Because in the area of work and occupation, this is the way that categories are. This is where the literature review comes in and helps to guide how you are coding, and how you are going to talk about these variables, right? The literature review is basically telling you this is how the research has categorized these numbers, and this is the way in which we look at these things. And so you would kind of follow that process, or if you wanted to create an alternative, you would explain why your alternative was better. So this is how I would categorize these categories. So in this case, right, I can highlight this. I'm just going to highlight it all to give you an example of how this works. If it could just move a little faster, my apologies. It's just one of those things where I'm trying to do it as quickly as I can, and then I click this green arrow, which is run. Up here's another way to click run, and basically it ran that. And so if I wanted to now go to my analyze descriptive frequencies, you see that's where occupation is. But if I go all the way down to the bottom, I should have my view occupation recoded. I hope this is the right one, otherwise I would look silly. And this is category. So see down here, this is this one right here. And this is the new category. And here's where they are, right? Upper service, 67.6%. Middle service, 16%. Lower service, 4.2%. Blue collar, 10.4%. And this is the total. Missing in the system was 1.8. Those are the number of people who are not working or identified as being working. Notice over here in the valid percent, right? It gives me the same percentages, but without that number, with the missing, without taking into account the missing. So the valid percent would be the one that I would want to report on. So what are the occupations that they have? Well, in Massachusetts, for those 50 and older, 68.8 are in upper service, 16.3 are middle service, 4.2 on lower service, and 10.6 are blue collar workers, as I have identified based on how I've broken these down. And so it gives you a better understanding of these numbers. See how too big, it's too hard. You break it down into smaller categories, usually less than 7, and it becomes a little bit easier to manage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you something like this. And I'm going to exit out of this so that you can see it all brand new. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a set of frequencies. And just to give you an example of what this will look like. Now, I'm going to give you this. This is the output. I'm going to save the output as a PDF file, and you're going to see it, and it's going to look. Apologies, it always takes me a few minutes to. All this stuff, all that'll be good. And sorry, gotta make sure that I put it in the right folder. All of this is the kind of thing that if I was a good user, I would have all set. And of course, one day well, maybe not really. I will never be good at this. I'm just kind of like, um, uh, I'm not as interested in being, in creating this content as probably I should be, meaning that the cutting and edging, I'm just not that particular about it. Anyway, so this is what you're going to get. And this is basically that same output. It's a PDF file. Here's the first one, metropolitan area, you know, non-identifiable area, how many live in Barnstable town, how many in the Boston, Cambridge, Newton area, how many in the Pittsfield area, Providence, Warwick area, and Springfield area, and the Worcester area. So same thing with city, right? Same thing with sex, gender. Here's age again, right? And so here's marital status. And what I'm going to have you do is that I am going to have you then identify the level of measurement, and I want you to explain what you see. Now, you know how to read a percentage, right? I mean, technically so let's take the easy one, right? Let's just take sex, right? In this case, males are 46.2%, females are 53.8%. So what I want you to do is to say that and use the valid percent column. And in the valid percent column, you're going to say, all right, 46.2% of this data set that includes people who are 50 years and older are men, and 53.8 are women or female, right? This is very straightforward, and that's how you're going to identify it, right? That's it. And is this the appropriate test? Percentages. Percentages is the appropriate test. Now, I might throw in every now and then a false one. Here's age. Here's the percentage by age. Other than what I told you, right, that as people get older, there are fewer of them, which makes perfect sense, right? Which is a good thing to put down. It's a good observation. If you get an observation that's kind of interesting that you can point out, uh, nothing but extra credit for that. That's just, that's like extra stuff that you could do. If you don't, that's not, no points taken away, nothing like that. But this is what I want you to do. I want you to tell me, is this appropriate? Do percentages tell you anything? What's the problem with this one? Now, I might throw something in like occupation instead of this, right? And if it's occupation, I might say, oh, here's occupation. Is there any problem with it? Now, here's an interesting one, marital status. I want to know what you can tell me about marital status. See, so I'm